Our next individual that's going to testify is Mr. Wilson. Ronnie Wilson. If it's all right with the chief engineer, I'll let Mr. Wilson go ahead and just give his presentation, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask questions afterward.
BRO-WNIE.
What?
You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. I provided written testimony in the first hearing in August, and I had no changes to that whatsoever, so it still stands, I guess. I won't read it again like I did the first time. But really, our role in this is we have a directive from the state water plan to assist GMDs and the Division of Water Resources in their management efforts, especially for the overall. And in May 2016, we had a request from GMD4 to look at the water level changes for those years that were given 2004, 2009, 2015. So we basically pulled the data out of our what we call our wizard database. And we focus on wells in and around within 20 miles of the GMD4 boundary. And we throw out the wells that we have status codes in all our measurements on the ones that we know are abnormal. Like if somebody measured the well and it was one nearby was pumping, we'll flag that. We know that. We throw all those kind of wells out. And so we then interpolate surfaces because across the Ogallala, based on this network of wells that we have. And so our interpolated grids are actually down to 250 by 250 meters. And then just for the sake of convenience, we store that information on averages for each POSS section. And then that's how we sort that data out a lot of times that way. And so the process, we kind of went over a couple of iterations. The first time we used all the data that we had, all the wells, and all those well measurements that met that criteria. We went to another iteration where we had some questions about a well in the southeast portion of the district, in 11 south, 27 west, 13, that had been showing a little more accelerated groundwater declines than its neighbors had. So we decided, in consultation with GMD4, to remove that. And then we had some questions about what influence the alluvial wells have on the process, and so we went through and flagged out the ones that we knew, and then reviewed some others, and we drew out some more wells, and repeated that whole process. And then we provided them that data, both in the GIS format and then it's a spreadsheet that shows the elevation of the land surface, the elevation of the bedrock, and then the water table elevation in 2004, 2009, and 2015, based on the wells that met that selection criteria. And again, that's all further outlined more in that written testimony. I don't know if I need to resubmit that, or is that part of the record? Okay. And I'll stand by it, nothing's changed from that.
Mr. Wilson, just really quickly, and I may have missed this, but based on your research, is the major reason for the decline in water tables the irrigated groundwater pumping?
I don't usually just isolate irrigation. I just say groundwater pumping. Yeah, okay. The groundwater use. We've got a couple of even recent studies we put out that show real high correlations between water level change and water use, groundwater usage, and that's especially true up here in Northwest Kansas. We get really strong correlations that we don't get elsewhere necessarily. Kind of depends on the data and time periods.
You've been here for all the testimony that has been presented today, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you heard the discussion about section level data versus township level data, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, you've supplied Mr. Tracer with his raw data that he created those maps from, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Real briefly, before we get into that conversation, can you tell me how long have you been a hydrologist?
Yeah, I started with the Division of Water Resources in '93, and I worked there until about 1999. I went to the water office for a couple of years, and then I went to the Kansas Geological Survey since 2001.
Okay.
And I've always been an analyst of some sort, especially with GIS, so geographic information, the spatial mapping data side is my forte, if you will.
So making maps is what you do.
Yeah, I really don't like making maps. I like dealing with spatial data, but actually making production maps gets a little bit tedious, but I'll do it. But I definitely like spatial data and map form, put it that way.
Okay.
In case my boss uses it as testimony, so.
What, do you have like a degree for this, or how do you mean?
I have a master's degree in geography.
Okay, okay. And what was, can I ask what your bachelor's degree in?
It's the same. I had a focus on the physical geography and then the geographic information system. So that.
Okay, okay. So, and I know Mr. Tracer's probably going to bring this up, so I might as well at this point. You can map things at a township level or at a section level, is that correct?
I can map things at all kinds of levels. It's just a matter, the challenge we have with the groundwater system is it's subsurface. And so we have to use point data and we have to use interpolation processes to get an idea of what it looks like over a continuous space. And there's a lot of different ways you can interpolate data. There's statistical means, there's mathematical means, but the success and the failure of those is always the input data, and what the density of that is. And so whether you're talking about how comfortable are you with a township level estimate versus a section level estimate, again, it all kind of goes back to where are my inputs that help me form that surface. Because if I don't have any input data, you're guessing on wells that are quite a bit away. But if you have a lot of higher concentrations of wells in a particular location, you have a lot greater confidence in that interpolated surface. And also the aquifer kind of determines a little bit of this too, because the more homogeneous it is, the less number of wells you might need. Where if you get in some situations where just based on the geology, it may demand more wells. Okay.
And would you describe the Northwest Kansas Groundwater Management District number 4 as fairly homogeneous?
I would say it's more, like relative to some of the other Ogallala ones, I would say it's a little more homogeneous compared to like GMD4, where you have other aquifer systems below it. Sometimes it's in contact with the Ogallala, sometimes it's not. GMD4 is actually very similar to GMD1 in terms of what their historic water level changes have been. I think some of the water supplies in GMD1 traditionally were a little bit shallower, and so they're a little more in a depleted environment, and so they're starting to get more diversity just from that reason alone. But yeah, I would say it's probably closer to being more the same than it is different on a GMD1 scale, or GMD4 scale.
And I've heard a bunch of your presentations before. So based on your experience, generally if there are conservation measures taken in the Northwest Kansas Groundwater Management District, will the Northwest Kansas GMD benefit from those conservation efforts as it relates to the water table?
Yeah, definitely in the place where conservation efforts take place, the people in that direct immediate area get the benefit of that for sure. Okay.
So to steal a shorthand phrase, what happens in the Northwest Kansas Groundwater Management District stays in the Northwest Kansas Groundwater Management District.
Right.
Okay. So based on this, the conservation efforts that are proposed by this plan, the water users in GMD should reap those benefits as far as conservation goes.
Yes.
Okay. Going back to township level, section level data, you could actually go down clear to lots. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, we do a lot of groundwater models, for example, and the one we're working on now is 400 feet by 400 feet. That's the cell size. So we interpolate that down to that level.
Okay. But what's the difficulty? And I think you kind of explained this a little bit. What's the difficulty as you kind of drill down further and further?
Well, it's not so much drilling down, it's that the confidence you have then in making a decision in this cell versus this cell, whether that's a section or that's a township, because again, the value that's in those sub areas is based on input data that was interpolated. And then the more you have those input points around or even in that area, the greater confidence you have in there.
Gotcha.
The farther away they are or the less dense they are, you have less confidence into them. But again, the more homogeneous your aquifer is, then that helps versus where it's a lot of heterogeneity to it.
Gotcha.
Heterogeneity.
Can you spell that?
No, I can't. I was always the first one out on the spelling bees, but yeah, wrong skill set.
Okay. And so when we look at the GMD, and I appreciate Mr. Tracer keeping that picture up on the screen for us. Thank you. Yes, I do. Oh, that's great. No, I'm not being facetious. In order to have good data, you need to have multiple data points, correct?
Yes, I'd like.
Okay. And based on the section level data and the measuring or the points that you have within the GMD that you are taking measurements from, you are most comfortable using that section level data to make decisions. Is that correct? Is that correct?
I mean, yeah, township scale in terms of making comparisons of what the water levels are doing directly in that township. I'm more comfortable with that scale. That would be an individual section level scale. I'm not saying either one is right or wrong. It's just that confidence that you have in the value that's being represented by that sub-area accurately represents the input points that are around it.
So you're more comfortable at the section level rather than the township level?
Or it all depends on how many input points I have around there. I may have a township that has no points in there. I got no confidence.
Okay.
I have littler confidence in that if I have a lot of input points around it of measured wells. And the same goes for sections. The interpolation process is just using those input points to spread that value across space. And again, the more you have, eventually the better your decisions can be.
And you're a scientist, right, Brownie?
I guess. Yeah.
Okay. And so, looking at political subdivisions is not necessarily something that you enjoy doing. Is that correct?
Say that again.
Looking at trying to carve this GMD up using political subdivisions like townships or sections, you would much prefer that we just look at the hydrology underlying that?
It makes it easier, yeah. But there's also, if you make a case for the township or the section level in terms of people can relate to that better.
Okay.
And that's probably one of the reasons why we store data at the section level, is that it's easy to query in databases and people can relate exactly where that is located at as opposed to trying to describe it in other ways.
In hydrological terms?
Sure.
Okay. And does it make it easier then for, DWR or GMD or some other political body to regulate those subunits? Or is that kind of outside your area? With
those agencies, everybody's got staff and computing power and knowledge, so it would tell us what the subunit is.
Gotcha. So, based on your expertise, if we had to choose to, or if the chief engineer had to choose to, make determinations at the section level or the township level, where would you, which one of those would you prefer?
If I had to pick between those two, the political boundaries, I would, the water levels, I would be more comfortable with the township scale.
Okay. Because you then, using those numbers, you know that you have the data points you need.
Right. Our network was designed to look for regional variations in the water table. And that's an appropriate scale for that.
Okay. Sounds good. I don't have any other questions. Thanks, Brian.
All right, Mr. Künstler.
No questions from DWR.
Thank you, Mr. Oley. I guess I'm a little confused, which is kind of normal. Don't shake your head.
No, I was diagonal.
All right. So I understand your testimony about the more data points you have, the more confidence you have in the data. And would you've got your copy of your testimony from the previous, and would you turn to the map on the 4th page or so? Are those crosses on the map the data points that you used?
Yes, sir.
And So when you say interpolating the data, what you're doing is you're taking any two of those points that are adjacent to one another, looking at the value there, and whatever else you know about that area, and trying to come up with the water level in between them, in essence.
Right, that's a general characterization of the interpolation process, and there's nuances depending on what you pick, but that's exactly it. Yeah.
So can you give, I don't want you to go into all the nuances, but what do you mean by nuances?
Like in the simplest case, like there's some that are just purely mathematically based. So I got a value here, you got a value there, it's divided by the distance. It's pure math. And then there's others that say, okay, I'm going to try to fit a surface over all my data points so that everybody's a little bit happy. And then there's some that I want to make sure I honor the points and this and that. So those are the nuances. Yeah.
So if you've got a data point with an elevation at you've got two data points with an elevation that are the same, but in the middle you've got a higher one. It's not a straight line up and a straight line down, it's a curved line. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Well, it could be. It depends on, again, there's different processes. The one I use was developed by the ESRI corporation that makes the ArcMap software.
Right.
They developed a routine that is designed for elevations.
And that's a routine that's commonly used by lots of people across the country for any number of things, including DWR staff that you interact with.
I'm sure, I don't know what Ginger uses, but yep, okay, that comes up, yeah.
Okay, and that's the KGS, that's the standard you use.
There's one of them. We have a lot of statisticians, they like Krieging. But,
They like what?
Krieging, it's another interpolation method that's out there. There are dozens of them.
Okay, but you've already told us that you're like me. I got the third percentile in spelling.
Okay.
Grade. What, can you spell?
Krieging is, I think I can get that one. That's a Krigiing.
Okay.
Right.
So, but the data that you used to provide to the GMD is the kind of data you normally rely on.
Yes.
And it is, in your testimony, you specifically, you heard me probably read, if you were paying attention, your testimony.
I was.
Oh, you were? Okay, well, So, I mean, at the bottom of the second page and onto the third page, you say that it can be readily computed at the section level. And are you now saying that you don't have confidence in that data?
No, what I meant by that statement was not so much a validation of the data, but that it was set up at the section level. And the selection of the wells that I chose, it was then set up so that you can make water level changes appropriately between 2004, 2009, 2015. A lot of times people do interpolate surfaces of 1 year, and they got wells for that set. And then they do another year, and they got wells for that set. And sometimes you have wells, and they come in 1 year, and they're not there the next. You can generate artificial highs and lows by doing that. And so my point by that is it was readily set up so that they can do those computations of the water level changes for that time frame.
And the data that you provided to the GMD and then subsequently to me there were 3 versions of it. And you testified that you started and then you took out some wells and you took out some more wells. And so there was version 1, version 2, and version 3 for each of the 3 levels that you took.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, the level for 2004 was based on readings during December of 2003, 2004, and 2005.
Yeah, I guess, let me back up to that first one.
Sure.
The version 1, version 2, version 3 was, version 1 I used all the wells we had in our system.
Okay.
And then my selection criteria.
Right.
Version 2 was we had that one well in 27, that was there. We had the one well that was in 11 South, 27 West, section 13, that showed a significant water level decline that we didn't really see in any other wells around it. So So I took that well out and then repeated all the same interpolation process.
Okay, you took that out in consultation with the GMD, so they agreed with that.
Yeah, they were the one that brought to my attention that area. And then, you know, then it was later brought to my attention that they wanted to see what it looked like without any alluvial wells in there and try to focus solely on the lava. So that was, I went through, we have, most of our wells, a lot of them have a geologic code that describes what material they're pulling from, the lava, or in this case, much younger, shallower alluvial sediments. Those ones that I knew were alluvial, we took those out, and some of those I had to review by hand based on well depth and whatnot. So I ended up taking those out, and repeat the entire interpolation process, and that's version 3.
Okay, and so version 3 is the data that's the most conservative in the sense of the most accurate, but taking out the data that might not really help us figure out what the groundwater contours.
It would be the one that's more focused solely on the Ogallala.
All right.
And it ignores the, you know, there is some connection with the alluvial systems, but it's felt to be pretty small, pretty light, play everything in between, so let's just take those into consideration. And most of those, honestly, were outside the district anyways.
And so you and I had a conversation about this at the governor's conference, and I asked you which set of data to use, and you suggested to use version 3.
Yes.
And for the record, that's the version I used. So I'm going to show you what is marked as exhibit, and I can't remember. So I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibit D, and I have that up on the screen. That, again, you were here this morning, and I'm sure you were enthralled by my direct examination. So you know what it is that I'm showing you here. It's the section level data using the values that, or the colors that the GMD used. Mr. D's asked you several questions about your confidence level at the township level, but isn't your understanding that this is the data they actually used to come up with their allocation?
Yeah, I'm confident at the section level too. Again, it's more, is there, whatever that subunit area is, how does that relate to my input points?
Okay.
And it doesn't matter if it's a section or a township. If I don't have a bunch of wells in there that interpolate service is trying to come up with values for, then I have less confidence in that.
All right. So looking back at your testimony and the map on the back in your testimony, there's an area that is in green in the southern part of Sherman County to get.
Yes.
That on Exhibit D, and that area on the maps in your on your testimony didn't have very many wells in it.
No well, yeah.
And so that area you're not very confident about. If I'm understanding, I don't want to put you. I'm asking.
Yep, that's right.
Is you don't have a lot of confidence in that area, but you have more confidence in the area where there's a higher density of wells. And to the extent that there's a high density of wells across this district, is as shown on your map, you have confidence in the section level data. Is that fair?
Yes.
I'm going to show you I will also tell you that not only can I not spell, I have a very good friend who's a mathematician, and he said, well, Dave, you just don't have, you're not very sophisticated in math. So, but I do know how to run to do a search on Google.
Okay.
And this is what I understood to be the correct formula for determining the annual rate of decline for the percent of annual decline. Is that formula the right formula?
That's not the one I use. I typically follow the one the way I think Ray described.
Okay.
I take a difference between, it's close, I take a difference between the absolute change from one year to the next, or one time period to the next, and then I divide that by the number of years in there to come up with an annual rate. And then you're still going to deal with an absolute, and then you just divide that by the original thickness, then you come up with a percent change what that is.
Okay. Can you, I appreciate that, but again, I'm not all that sophisticated. And can you write that formula down so I can follow it?
Sure.
Because I don't know how to. Can tell me again how you do that?
Well, let's keep it simple now. Let's say we had 10 feet of saturated thickness.
Right.
And it dropped down to, try to keep it simple for myself here. Say it dropped down 5 feet in 5 years.
Okay.
So the annual rate of decline is about 1 foot per year.
Right.
So I found by taking 5, 10, I have negative 1. So I tell me I have a decline on an annual basis of 1 foot per year. On a percentage basis, then I just take that 1 divided by 10 and give me that it was 90% or 0.1% of whatever of that original thickness was.
All right.
This one you're taking it to a power and but yeah, I guess it gets to that point. That's just the way I do it.
Okay. I would appreciate it if you'd write it down so that I can put it in a formula and run it so that my data
Sure.
matches their data, because I don't want to mislead anybody. I want to make sure that we compare apples to apples.
Right, and that's the way I do it. I guess that's the way Ray does it. So yeah.
Okay. No further questions?
All right, Mr. Dees, any follow-up?
Okay, yeah, just real quickly. By using the township levels, does that ensure that you have enough data points that you need to make accurate determinations?
It doesn't ensure it, it just helps. It's in a bigger area, so you're encompassing more points.
But it increases your probability that you're going to have a more accurate picture because of the greater
I'm
distance.
going to object. Simstak's not influenced. That's not the way they did it. We didn't do it like that. We did it by section.
Excuse me.
I mean, you're the one that sort of brought this section levels, that's what your data is, so.
I'm recording my objection.
Okay.
That Simstak's
I'll go ahead and let the question be answered though, with that objection.
Yes,
Sure, absolutely. So, and maybe I can do it better than I did last time. So by using townships, and townships are bigger than sections, right?
Yeah.
Okay. By using townships as your geographical boundary, that encourages additional points of data because you have additional test wells, and because that allows for those additional data points, it increases the accuracy of the information that you would have on a large scale.
I'd say it increases the accuracy. It increases my confidence level.
Okay.
Because it's just, again, you're dealing with an interpolated continuous surface, and so you're always going to be accurate in terms of how you aggregate that up or down. And I don't think necessarily, it gives maybe a bigger, better representation, a greater probability of representing what's actually occurring within that sub-area, that township level.
I'm glad you answered the question I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I don't know.
But the data that you provided to the GMD was section level data.
Right.
You didn't provide them, I mean, they could calculate the township level from the data you provided, but you provided them section level
Right.
data. That's the data they used to come up with their map.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, I think, Mr. O'Leary, do you have anything?
Mr. Tracer just said that the sectional level is the data that the GMD used to come up with their map. What map? When you answered yes, what map were you referring to?
The one you just had. Well, the second one. The township map right there was made from that section level data. It was aggregated up to the township level minus sections that didn't have 15 feet of saturated thickness in there.
And that's attachment 1 to, I think, Exhibit A.
Yes.
Okay, no further questions.
All right. I think we're done with Mr. Wilson.
Do you want me to comment on this stuff?
Oh, yes, maybe so. That's right. Mr. Dees, why don't you ask him some questions about, or who wants to do that?
Basically, I just wanted, Mr. Wilson, are you the one that created that map?
Yes.
Okay. And I mean, it's a true and accurate representation of what, it's that map that you have is a true and accurate representation of what you created.
Right.
Okay. Those are all the questions that I had on that, and I think at this point we can just enter it into evidence unless Mr. Tracer has other questions about it.
It's old data. I mean, it's data from the time frame. And, right.
I think I made two of them. I think I made that one in conjunction with the one from the 90s when the decline rates were different.
Sure.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it shows that there are areas that have a large saturated thickness in a long time, whether it's 250 years or 100, it's a long time.
Relative to the decline rate for that.
Exactly. Thank you. Move the admission of the exhibit in.
All right, so, admitted.
Thank you.
Thank you. You may step down. Mr. Dees?
We just have a couple of board members that have been gracious enough to come and make some comments. Let's go first. Okay. Brent Rogers, president of the Groundwater Management District Board, he'll go ahead and present first.
Mr. Rogers, this is ROG. Would you raise your right hand? You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. I'm Brent Rogers, GMD Board President, and I represent Sheridan County. I live at 322 North Road 30N. I farm and irrigate in the northeast part of the county as well as western Graham County, so I'm in that finger that sticks out clear on the eastern side. I have no restrictions with this proposed LEMA. Although I am not directly restricted, I want to do all I can in this LEMA to conserve because it will be beneficial to me if I can keep my township the same color if and when there is another 5-year iteration. In the far western portions of my irrigated acres, we see significant drawdown in the latter part of the pumping season. I've had to re-nozzle 2 pivots in that area. This area sits on the edge of a purple township. If the status quo continues, I will most certainly have a township color change coming in the next iteration. I have adopted moisture probes and timed my irrigation to what they are telling me. We are also seeing some tremendous yields with flex hybrids planted at lower populations while watering and fertilizing less. My point is if we try to conserve even the areas that are not affected in this LEMA, we will only help ourselves in the future. We have seen SD6 do some wonderful things with larger cuts than anyone will receive in this proposed LEMA. I want to see my kids have the opportunity that I have had to irrigate in the future. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Dees, any questions?
I don't have any questions on it, Mr. Priester.
Were you here for Ray's testimony?
Yes, I was.
Did you heard it all?
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, do you have anything to add to that or take away? Is there anything that, I'm not suggesting that you got it wrong, but I'm just wondering if there's anything that you want to supplement or add to?
No. Can I make a comment? I think something that has just struck me profoundly in the last several hours sitting here looking out across this audience. If you take all the lawyers and all the representation by DWR and all the organizations that are here, the Kansas Corn Commission, and you take them out of this scenario, how many people are actually here as water users? We have 3,600 water rights. And we see this at a lot of our meetings. I mean, I know there's harvest going on, and I know that's very important to people, but this is really important. And it's hard for us board members to wrap our heads around these things when we come to a meeting like this. I expected to come here today and not be able to get a seat. Really did. And it shocks me. Thank you.
All right. Mr. O'Neill, I assume you had nothing? My apologies. All right.
And then our last, as far as I know at this point, witness is going to be Mr. Goosen.
Sir, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
My name is Len Gosen. I've been farming in southern Thomas County area for 34 years. I've watched the water table decline in my area, and I want to testify that I believe that this LEMA is a good start to slowing down the rate of decline. I think it's better for the whole area, for all of us, to solve this problem together, rather than for senior water right to attempt to shut down junior water rights. And if we all cut back a little bit, and by cutting back we slow the rate of decline, this should allow all to continue to irrigate instead of the junior right owners being shut off completely. All of my irrigation wells will have an allocation given to them under this LEMA. I am willing to work with all of my neighbors to save water for the next generation.
All right. Mr. Dees?
I may have missed this. Can you give us your address where you
Yeah, it's 1154 County Road 22, Colby, Kansas.
Mr. O'Neill, anything?
No questions.
All right. Mr. Tracer?
I didn't catch where you farm. Where is your
I farm in southern Thomas County
farm?
about,
Thomas.
yes.
All right. Thank you very much. So I'd like to take just a 5-minute break so we can sort of come up with our plan from here. So we'll reconvene at 4:20. Well, we'll go back on the record. So Mr. Dees, you're done. That's correct. Right. Very good. So Mr. O'Neill, I invite you forward to call your witnesses.
Again, my name is Aaron O'Neill.
Test. Test. My name is Aaron O'Lean, attorney for the Division of Water Resources, and at this time we call Mr. Kelly Stewart to the stand. Mr. Stewart, would you please explain your current position with the Division of Water Resources?
Okay. I'm currently in the position of Water Commissioner at the Stockton Field Office.
And the Stockton Field Office, what's its relation to the GMD4 area?
Well, the entire GMD4 district is within my field office boundaries.
Mr. Stewart, you previously, in conjunction with Mr. Lane Letourneau, submitted some written testimony prior to today's hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Forgive me, Chief Engineer, has that written testimony been assigned an exhibit designation?
I don't. Yes, it is being.
Exhibit B, okay, thank you. Mr. Stewart, can you explain a little bit about your office's involvement, to what extent your office was involved with the LEMA that we're here discussing today?
Okay. Well, over the course of the last few years, my office, either myself or another staff member, we attend every board meeting. We like to go to every board meeting to stay abreast of what the board and staff are discussing. We're often in a position where we answer questions. We have a lot of interaction with staff and board on a regular basis. We've attended basically every meeting leading up to this LEMA proposal.
Did your office instruct or recommend that the GMD4 initiate this LEMA proceeding?
No, we did not. That was a board of directors decision to move forward on that proposal.
You said that as part of you or your staff's attending the GMD meetings on this LEMA issue, that did you say you provided some support in conjunction with their formulation of this proposed LEMA?
Well, from the aspect of looking at the data that they had come up with, analyzing their spreadsheet to see if we agreed with the numbers, and just a little bit of cross-checking.
You said you just now mentioned some analysis. Were you referring to, well, one moment. Chief Engineer, which exhibit designation is the actual proposed LEMA?
Is A the proposed LEMA?
It's included within A.
Okay. The proposed LEMA's goal of saving a certain amount of gallons over a period. Are you aware of that stated goal, Mr. Stewart?
Yes.
And what is that stated goal to your knowledge?
Well, basically their goal is to limit the total amount of pumping in the townships that are being restricted to 1.7 million acre-feet of water over a 5-year period.
And did you say that your staff did some analysis of whether the proposed LEMA's corrective controls will meet that goal or not?
Yes, we did review that data, or my staff did review the data, and we agree it does appear that goal can be met under the proposal.
Did your staff assist with any informational website tools that the public could consult as part of their being informed about this LEMA process?
Right, yes. Our staff did work with GMD4 and developed a tool where you could plug in your water right number and look up your potential allocation under the LEMA.
If the chief engineer chooses to designate this proposed LEMA as it is currently proposed, or even in any form, really, will your office provide any assistance to the GMD with respect to ensuring that the LEMA corrective controls are followed?
Yes, we are prepared to work together with GMD4 and manage the LEMA, oversee the allocations, work with the public, compliance and enforcement. We are prepared. We are staffed to do that. In fact, we even added a special position at Stockton whose primary duties are to work with GMDs and also folks interested in water conservation areas. So we are prepared to do that.
Is it the opinion of the Division of Water Resources that this LEMA will be successful in meeting its stated goal?
Yes.
No further questions.
Okay, Mr. Dees, anything?
No.
All right, Mr. Tracer? No questions. No questions. Very good. All right, Mr. O'Leary, thank you. I don't have any questions. Next witness.
Division will call Lane Letourneau to the stand.
I'm waiting. I'm waiting.
Yes, my first name is Lane, L-A-N-E. Last name's Letourneau. It's L-E-T-O-U-R-N-E-A-U.
Sir, would you raise your right hand? You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in this case?
I do.
Mr. Letourneau, what's your current position with the Division of Water Resources?
I am the Water Appropriation Program Manager.
And what duties does that entail?
The Water Appropriation Program entails administering the Water Appropriation Act.
You heard the testimony of Mr. Stewart. He is the Water Commissioner at the Stockton Field Office. Are you in charge of overseeing or assisting with all of the division's water commissioners?
We have 4 field offices in Kansas, each one with a water commissioner, and those field offices are in the Water Appropriation Program.
Mr. Letourneau, have you been here in the audience throughout today's hearing?
Yes.
Did you hear some testimony or mention given of the prior appropriation doctrine?
Yes.
Sometimes it's maybe been referred to today as first in time, first in right. Is that a yes?
Yes.
I can't recall whether one of the witnesses said this. I think so, but I won't phrase the question this way. But if this LEMA is designated as currently proposed, will that be the end of the prior appropriation doctrine?
No.
Can you explain what you mean by that?
Absolutely. Water rights in Kansas have a priority based on the time the application was filed. And this proposed LEMA is a management plan that establishes allocations. Those allocations were going to be across the board, not based on priority. But you've heard priority, first in time, first in right, and things. This LEMA does not touch the first in time, first in right for priority if impairment would occur. If there was interaction between 2 water rights then the junior water right will still be curtailed to meet the senior water right standards.
Okay, so in looking currently on the projection, we have attachment 1 to the GMD's proposed LEMA, and this is their map that shows the different colored townships, correct?
Correct.
So I'm going to ask you to, for example, look at any two townships where there are two different colors that are adjacent to each other. Okay? If a senior water right is in the more restrictive of the two townships, and the junior is across the township line on the less restrictive of the two colored townships, if the junior claims to DWR that, I'm sorry, if the senior claims to DWR that the junior across the township line is impairing the senior's water right, what action will the division take?
Actually, in that case, we would conduct a pump test to see how much interaction between the two wells, if any. And we would make a determination of what percentage then that junior was impacting the senior's water right, and we would curtail pumping based on that percentage.
So this LEMA as proposed with its different allocations based on different townships, that will not prevent a senior water right from being able to claim to your agency that an impairment exists. They will still be able to make that claim, and you will still analyze that claim.
Absolutely.
And if you find that impairment has occurred by the junior, you will perform some sort of action to honor the priority of the senior. Is that correct?
Correct.
If someone is issued a certificate of appropriation, does that guarantee that well, let me back up. Strike that. If someone is issued a certificate of appropriation, they are given an authorized quantity. Is that correct?
Correct.
Is that a guarantee that they will always be able to withdraw that quantity of water from the aquifer?
No. Just because you have a water right doesn't guarantee you have water.
No further questions.
See if that got turned down or something.
Okay,
A little bit close enough.
I think he just needs to hold it closer.
Okay.
Mr. Dees, you have anything? I'm sure Mr. Tracer doesn't have anything. No.
Been waiting a long time. Back over.
David, Kenny has told this joke 5 times, and it's funnier every time. You know, and finally, it crosses Avenue and Road. Because I've been, sorry. How long have you been the program manager at DWR?
The program manager, David, I think 2008 to now 9 years, I believe.
And what were how long have you been at DWR?
I've 30 years now.
And what was your role before program manager?
Okay. I came in 30 years ago as a Hydro 1 processing new applications.
Okay.
Then a number of years after that, when I believe a law changed to where we were required, folks were required to file annual water use reports, and so I became the state's water use coordinator, was that title. Then, because that had a civil penalty attached to it, when our laws were changed then for civil penalty authority, I got handed that also. So I was in compliance, enforcement, and water use for a number of years.
So, reviewing new appropriations, compliance and enforcement, and then in charge of the whole program generally.
Yeah, and then David, I gotta add in there, while I was working on new applications, I also worked on change applications.
Okay.
So I worked on everything but the certificate either.
All right. So, the Division of Water Resources has had a number of, very briefly, there was, in 1999, there was a statute change, and DWR took its policy procedure manual and put it into regulations. You were familiar, you're familiar with that process and how that came about.
Yes.
Generally speaking, tell me about the policy procedure manual versus the regulations.
Okay. And I'll just take it based on how I understand it.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I first started, we had two large books, still have them, I still maintain. Denise Ross was David Pope, the previous chief engineer secretary. She maintained what was called policies and procedures established from the chief engineer. And those were policies that we used then to process new applications, change applications, certificates, on how we did things. Well, then in 1999, the law changed from when we were the Board of Agriculture and became the Department of Agriculture. And our secretary then got some administrative authority. It's my understanding then, our policies and procedures did not have the force and effect of law, so we had to put those in rules and regs.
Okay. I think that's enough. It's kind of fun to go into the details, but let's not. So I've handed you a series of stack documents. The top document's Exhibit N, as in Nathan. Is that an example of policy, of the kind of policies that were in place or that were in these two notebooks?
Yes.
I have just one notebook. I didn't know there were two. Is it?
I imagine what Denise Ross kept was the history,
Yeah.
and so I think our books would have every iteration of a policy.
Sometime I'd like to see your books.
Absolutely.
That's fine, different issue. All right, so take a look at Exhibit N. Tell me what it is.
This is an administrative policy number 8333, and the subject is allowable quantities, certificates of appropriation for irrigation use.
And the certificate, basically, this provides that when you issue a certificate, now that the water right has been applied for and perfected, and you're issuing the certificate, when you're issuing a certificate, you are supposed to reduce the quantity in this region to 2.25 acre feet per acre, correct?
Yes, if it was higher than 2.25.
Right. So, and if you look at the map that's projected on the screen, which is attachment 1 to Exhibit A, the easternmost township shown on that map is Township 21, correct?
Correct.
And so if you compare that map to the last paragraph, the last indented paragraph in Exhibit N, all of GMD4 is west of the Township 2021 line, correct?
Correct.
So at the time this policy was in effect, every water right that was certified got reduced if it was higher to 2.25 acre feet per acre.
Yes, if it was higher.
And if it was perfected at a lower quantity than it was perfected, that was the limit. Okay, can you take a look at Exhibit O, which is the next document in the series?
Yes.
And that is, again, same policy, 83.3, but it supersedes the undated version that's in Exhibit N, correct?
Correct.
And it reduced the quantity in GMD4 and other areas from 2 1/4 to 2 acre-feet per acre, right?
Correct.
And take a look at Exhibit P. And this is dated in 1986, right? And on the second page, it has the same standards showing 2 acre-feet per acre west of the Township 2021 line, right?
Correct.
But in this policy, we've moved from changing the certificate to the allowable quantity for a new permit, correct?
What was considered reasonable to apply for a new permit.
Right. Okay, so then in 2000, you
just need a bigger podium.
yeah.
And you're going to connect all this questioning to the LEMA at some juncture, right?
Well,
Maybe or maybe not, I hope so.
Well, I hope so too.
Yeah.
so stepping back a little bit,
DWR publishes
establishes regulations at the request of Groundwater Management Districts, correct?
Correct.
And those regulations, are you familiar with the regulations from 83? You didn't come to the agency till 87, did you?
I mean, if they were in place, I would be familiar with
Sure.
it. Sure.
But you're aware that there was a planned depletion policy in GMD4
Yes.
and how to calculate that? I mean, you were you were doing permits back in
Correct.
when you first came, so it was a 2-mile radius circle and it was 2%. And then it changed to 1, and then it went to safe yield, sustainable yield, whatever that.
Yeah, and we were very fortunate in the new applications unit because we actually would make sure that that application was in proper form, that we sent it out to the groundwater management district for their recommendation.
Sure. And so all these permits that were issued either up until 91 would have been for 2 acre-feet per acre. And then later it was, when the regulation was amended, it went to 1.5, right?
Correct.
And so now when you issue a permit, when the chief engineer issues a permit, he makes findings of fact, doesn't he?
Yes.
The statute requires him to make findings of fact.
Correct.
And in each one of those cases, he issues a cover letter, does he not?
Yes.
And the cover letter will say something to the effect that we find that the quantity is reasonable. And if you
Sure. And
look at Exhibit R in that stack, and I will represent to you that these came out of my files. They're not necessarily in GMD4, but they're typical letters. Well, they're letters that came out of my file. Are these, take a look at them, 68, 72, 76. I mean, these are the sort of typical form letters that DWR has used over the years, aren't they not?
Yes.
And then toward the end, there are a couple of judgment sheets, right?
Yes.
And those judgment sheets contain the information, the findings that DWR has to make, that the chief engineer has to make in order for him to issue a permit, right?
Correct.
And those findings include it was made in good faith, proper form, beneficial purpose, within reasonable limitations, won't impair existing use, and doesn't prejudicially or unreasonably affect the public interest. Right?
Yes. Right.
Those are the findings that he has to make before he can issue a permit, not by statute, right? And so when he does that and somebody perfects the water right, that water right has characteristics, doesn't it? It has a priority date, has a file number, it has a rate, it has a quantity, it has a place of use, it has a point of diversion, it has like 8 or 9 characteristics.
And use made of water.
Use made of water. So, and you're familiar with the Clausen versus DWR case?
Yes.
And it says that once that permit's issued, the chief engineer doesn't have authority to reduce it, does it?
I'll object, that's a conclusion of law. I think Mr. Tracy had similar objections, so I'll put mine on the record as well.
I concur in that objection.
You've read the Clausen case?
Yes.
And it says that he can't retain jurisdiction to make reductions after the permit's issued, right? If you know.
You know, I do know that we can't retain jurisdiction, but I don't know about reductions.
Okay.
I'll be honest about that.
All right, that's fine. So, what?
Well, and I don't know if we're not actually reducing the water rights with this lien.
Right, no,
It's a management plan that sets an allocation. Someone can still pump their authorized quantity as long as it's within the 5-year allocation over 5 years. So we're not making a reduction. This is trying to implement a management plan.
I see. Okay, so it doesn't change the terms of the water right, just means that you just can't use it according to its terms. Fair?
You can within 1 or 2 years probably, but not every year for 5 years.
Right, okay, but without this, this water right gives you the ability to divert the full quantity every year, not only for 5 years, but until there's no more water available, right?
Right.
If you want to do it, and that's the tragedy of the commons that we're dealing with in western Kansas.
That's correct.
So, in your written testimony and according to, well, how many LEMAs are there now? You know?
One.
Just one? And that's in the Sheridan 6, okay? And there are a lot of others under consideration.
Not LEMAs. We've got a number of water conservation areas under consideration. But this is the only, there's another one that's being considered in GMD4.
There are some on the horizon.
Correct.
People are discussing
Yes.
this. And in your written testimony, you say that you've hired staff to coordinate this LEMA. Is that position filled?
Yes.
So if you've got a position to coordinate and help with this LEMA, but it hasn't been approved yet, I mean, can't one conclude that it's a fait accompli?
No, to explain our planning on staffing, I was on the governor's water vision team, and we went out, I don't know, 500 meetings, I think is the number of meetings we had with thousands of people. And what we heard was, we need to do something and we need to do it locally. And so, what we then, knowing that the LEMA process would require additional staff time from us, And then also the water conservation areas was going to require additional staff time from us. So it wasn't just thinking that this LEMA is going to go through. We've got multiple conservation plans that we need additional staff for.
And that was pretty much what Kelly testified to as well, right? That there was more than that. But when you written testimony that you submitted, you say it's a dedicated staff person with the primary responsibility of assisting within the field office area, including GMD4 stakeholders in developing and administering LEMAs and water conservation areas. I mean, really, it looks like you hired somebody to administer this LEMA, even though it hadn't been approved yet. And I'm just telling you how it looks. I'm just saying. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, we do, but we also know that we will have water conservation areas also where we need the help.
I don't have any questions.
All right, very good, thank you. Any follow-up, Mr. Lee?
Mr. Letourneau, do you know when the LEMA statute was passed?
I can look at it, 2011 maybe, 12.
Was it passed after all these, I think it was exhibits N through R that Mr. Traster referred to, some old policies and old letters. Was the LEMA statute passed after those exhibits were created?
Yes.
No further questions.
All right, Mr. Dees, anything?
No.
Okay. Very good.
Thank you.
So, I just, one correction or testimony, I don't know when you became program manager, but it was before 2007, so I guess you were in place when I became chief engineer. So. Maybe it was during 2007. I'm not sure. Anything else from DWR?
No further witnesses from DWR.
All right.
Culvert, Chairman.
All right. Bruce. Yeah, so I guess we didn't deal with the exhibits. Do you want all of those? Okay, so, yes, did you miss Q?
No, it's in there. I think that's the district.
Oh, yeah.
What is Q?
Q
is our new, it's the new.
Oh, I didn't ask you about that.
Okay, so, so exhibits N, O, P, and R have been requested. Any objections? Aaron?
One moment, let me make sure
Are there any skips in that you got?
There's no Q.
A through R.
As far as I know, we've done everything. Just a second, let us.
Mr. Tracer, did you redact, did you say you redacted some information from letters on exhibit R?
I didn't say that.
Okay, what did you redact?
I just redacted any personal information to one of the forms of the letters that are typical to be, and there, by the way, there's same letters that are attached to them. So it's just.
No objections. To N, O, P, and R.
All right, so we'll have all those admitted, and there'll be no Q. All right, have a seat. You can tell us your name and address to start with.
Burton Stramel, 1267 K25, Colby, Kansas. Live and farm here in Colby.
And you're one of the interveners in this case? Oh, swear him in.
Ron, you can get the spelling of your name.
STRAMEL Bert, B-E-R-T.
Raise your right hand. Please do solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God.
I do.
And you're one of the interveners in this case?
I am.
And did you give us an address? You might have.
Yes, 1267 K25 Colby.
Just like we've done elsewhere, go ahead and say what you say.
I'd like to put just a little bit of a personal aspect to this. This has probably been the most informational meeting we've had on this whole process the whole time. I don't know if that's because you're in charge or what the case is, but as a farmer, we start everything with the process, and we try and know everything we can about that process going forward. When we pick out hybrids, when we pick out machinery that we use, we try and get as much knowledge and as much data about everything, and we try and max it out to the absolute max that we can in order to be profitable and efficient. And in this case, many of the things we asked for at the very beginning, like increased measuring points or increased data points, so that we can actually find out where we can do the most good and do the most good. And to back up some of these maps have been ignored from the beginning. Many of us today have talked about this being a real property right, and I believe it is. It has value. I've had the city of Colby offer to buy some of mine, and they didn't want the land, they wanted the water and access to it. And that shows that it has a cash value. And I have 5 kids at home, and I want them to be able to have all the types of enjoyment and use of the water that we have now. But I also want them to have other rights that have been granted to them. And I don't foresee, just because it's for the greater good, to take away a right or restrict it. I feel that's a slippery slope. It's like today, this was the first time the no more than 25% reduction was actually explained to an extent that it could be understood. We've never had a full explanation of how this appeals process is going to work. I have several of my personal water rights that I know are going to need to go through this appeals, and I'm not sure how well I'm going to be served by it without knowing the process, without knowing who is going to be in charge of it, if it's going to be this current board, if it's going to be current staff. I mean, who knows what future staff or future boards are going to look like. And to just walk into this without having some of these questions answered is reckless. We wouldn't go into our fields and plant something without having some idea of what to expect. I'm closely related to 2 of the board members, and I don't know how that affects it, but there could be some family issues there, and I'm not sure how that's gonna work out. Also, some of the board members were competitors. We bid on the same property. We work in the same neighborhoods. We bid on the same contracts or same leases. And there's going to be some dynamics in that. And the only being able to appeal to staff, and then how much further you can take it past that. There's no third party. There's no jury of your peers. It's just too much to give up without knowing in the beginning what we're getting into. A lot of people aren't here today, and it's just a lot of people. This is a big year. We've had 2 years of declining farm incomes, and there's a lot of people just hanging on. And if you didn't fully understand it, and which I think there's a lot of people that don't fully understand, you're going to go home and you're going to take care of your home. So, in those regards, that's most of my deal. I just today was, I would almost ask you to hold another one of these hearings because of so much information that's come out that never came out in the informational hearings we had before this.
I'm going to hand you what's been marked as Exhibit Q. Can you identify? I'll hand you what's been marked as Exhibit Q. Can you identify that?
I believe this is the handout we were given at the informational meeting here in Colby.
And so when you turn it over and look at the front page, down in the lower corner, there's if you'll turn it over, there's some dates for meetings. You see those?
Yes.
And those are the same dates that were announced earlier today when the public meetings were, correct?
That's correct.
And so what's on the back of the document?
It's just a few highlights. It has a couple bullet points here of the plan.
So you were here for Mr. Newman's testimony, right?
I was.
And he testified that the plan itself, with all the detail, was published on the website about the time or in the time frame when it was submitted to DWR for review. You heard that?
I believe so.
Okay, and so this document that you're seeing now, did you receive or were you aware of other documents between the Colby meeting and that published on the website that gave you the specific details that are in the plan now?
I may have been given a handout at a GMD4 monthly meeting. Other than that, no, there was no handout of the actual LEMA plan prior to that.
If the plan was explained at these public meetings?
In pretty big generalities.
Okay. Tell me about that.
Well, after reading the plan now and looking back, there was no discussion as to the meter logging, where you would need to, I believe, keep an accurate log of all water meters every 2 weeks. And there was no mention that if that log was incomplete or inaccurate and you have a meter failing, that you could possibly lose an entire year's allocation because of it.
Okay. And this, you mentioned the appeal process. I mean, it's to the staff and then the board, but if the board votes against you, there's no further process that you're aware of?
Not to my knowledge. Even reading the LEMA document now, I believe that it's an appeal to staff and then an appeal to the board.
And that's it?
And that's it.
So,
I don't know where else you would go after that.
All right, very good. No further questions. Is there anything else you need to add?
No further questions. All right, Mr. Hayes.
Real briefly. So is it your testimony that you did attend the Colby public meeting where, is it Exhibit S? Q, where Exhibit Q was handed out?
Yes.
Okay, and is it your testimony today that you have attended multiple board meetings over the last, I don't know, 2 years?
Yes.
Okay, and at those board meetings, have there been discussions about the LEMA?
Yes.
Okay. Have there been open forum sessions where you could make personal comments?
Yes, you can make comments.
Have you made comments?
I have.
Okay. Have they been about the LEMA?
I have.
Okay. As well as, I believe, did you attend the initial hearing in front of Hearing Officer Owens?
I did.
Okay, and did you submit testimony there?
I did. I did oral and written testimony.
Okay, and then you've come today, and you've presented oral testimony, and I'm not sure if you presented written testimony. Have you,
Not today, I haven't.
okay, but you may do that, or you may not, depending on what you want to do.
Correct.
Okay. And you did say that you had thought you'd been given a handout at a GMD4 board meeting that had more specifics of the plan. Is that correct?
It's when I think at the meeting that the motion was presented to forward it on to the chief engineer. I believe there was a handout then
Okay.
that we were able to take a look at.
Were you at the annual, the 2017 annual GMD4 meeting?
Was that in Goodland at the water? Yeah, I was there.
Okay. And was the LEMA discussed there that you know?
Yeah, I believe it was.
Okay. Okay. I think I don't have. Have you ever asked for the plan outside of being handed the plan at that GMD board meeting where it was then approved?
I'm not sure what you would have asked for at the time. I think it was still under construction or under.
So no. So I guess the answer is.
I never had a rough draft or anything that I know of.
Okay. Did you ever ask for a rough draft?
No, I didn't.
Okay. Thanks.
Mr. O'Lean, anything?
No.
Mr. Tracer, anything more? No questions. All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you have any more witnesses? You're done. Okay. With the, I guess we didn't talk about closing remarks. Do you all want to make any closing remarks? You obviously have the opportunity to provide some written comments. All right. I will, I was going to see if anybody else wanted to make any public comments, if that's what you're getting to here. So, yes. Okay, so that concludes our formal process. I will, before we sort of move to conclusion, ask if there's any public that would like to make any additional statements. Yes, come on forward, please.
My name is Mike Schultz, live in Brewster, Kansas, 419 6th Street, SCHULTZ.
Sir, would you raise your right hand? Mr. Smith, swear or affirm that the testimony you will give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do. Well, thank you for having me today. I want to thank GMD4 for this work. I've been serving on the Upper Buckingham River Basin Advisory Board for the governor of Kansas, I guess, Groundwater Management District. We're getting some stuff done there. So I've been involved in the water industry for years and years. Been a past irrigator, a farmer rancher, owned land here in Thomas County, a family homestead in the 1890s. By the way, we've never had an irrigation well on our own land. We have rented irrigation land before and done that. I would ask that, has anybody here ever not had water? We'll turn the spigot on someday and find out. And I'm a stock guy. I run a cow operation, and I'm really concerned about the impairment clause in the water law because I have been impaired by irrigation. I've not taken it to task yet. I've got a neighbor that I seriously think about doing that with. But to drill new wells, $6,000 to $8,000, been through that. So we spent some money doing those things. The other thing I would do is ask a question to people about water quality versus water quantity. And the reason I bring that up is I'm also a city administrator for city superintendent for the city of Brewster. We're getting ready to spend $1.5 million possibly on a water treatment plant if we can't find an alternative source. And that comes into the issue of agriculture because it's a nitrate contamination problem. So I would tell some of you that less than 3% of the world's water is potable. It's good to use. I think the Ogallala Aquifer is some of the best in the world. We find out that, you know, in the 1940s, I believe it was, there was an article came out and they kind of discovered the Ogallala Aquifer where they thought it was an inexhaustible supply of water. And I would like for people to go back and maybe go home tonight and just Google search Kansas and then scroll up and look at the pivots. And Nebraska is a unique place. They actually increased the water there versus us as declining usage here in Kansas. So that's a big concern to me, what's going on. But you can look at the problem. It's overproduction. We've had people that have abused the water rights. I know in the 70s we had ditch irrigation. We wasted tons of water. Everybody thought it was never going to end. Well, guess what? The days are here. We got to wake up and pay attention. I think too, also back in the early days, the irrigation was developed to help with the livestock needs in these counties out here in northwest Kansas. So one of the biggest reasons the irrigation took off was for livestock. It wasn't so much to produce $2.90 corn, but that's what we got to deal with. Board of Trade does that. You know, I see the biggest problem in the water deal, and I've made the statement several times. We're getting into a position and trying to curb water use when we got people that think they're going to farm every acre in the county and they're going to feed the world. And 80% of the world's population makes less than $1,200, and we're not going to do that. So my deal with the water concern is, and I know because I sell water, but at $8 a thousand for an area, even eastern Kansas towards Hayes, Wilson area, you do the math on a simple 120 acre pivot at $8 a thousand, and come tell me what your corn's worth at $8 a thousand. And it takes roughly 3,000 gallons of water to produce a bushel of corn today. And at $8, you do the math. So I guess I'm coming at it a little different deal. I'm a pretty conservative deal, and I think the LEMA even needs to be more strict. If we don't see a decline stopping, we've got to go to the next level. And so I want to lay that out there. I heard a comment made today that maybe people are being treated worse. And I would like to say this. You think about treated worse, what happens when the public runs out of water? And the public vote on this issue. Right now, we can control our own destiny. I don't think people realize what's going to happen if it goes to a vote. I deal with the city and the municipal side, and I talk to people every day about it. It's a big concern, and you want to be careful what you wish for. We have about, I think they said the people in the world, if the water use, and that's what you get into, is the high quality water versus non-potable water. And I can't stress enough the importance of taking care of what we've got here. I hope we continue. My kids, I'd like to have people come back, have people to work for me, just like everybody else. I know that these rents are going to get us in trouble. You've got $2.90 corn, and people got to pay their bills. I know what they're fighting. It's not a big deal. It is financially. I know. I've been in the deals. I've been in the stock market in the 80s. We lost a lot of money. You make decisions that sometimes don't work out. So if you want to overproduce and waste the good water, I just can try to warn people. Pay attention. It's worth more than the oil or anything underground and what you can produce on top. But I think water is very important. So with that, I just wanted to make sure people understood how important water is.
Thank you very much. Any questions from either side?
No question.
All right, thank you. All right, the last call. Any public comments out there? Yes.
Jason Mossberger again. Do you need?
Yeah, I'll just remind you, you're under oath.
Okay. So a lot of people are really struggling with when some of this information came out. So just as a person in the public, I'll tell you my recollection of the information and the actual language of the LEMA. So the first time I had open access to the actual language of what the fleshed out LEMA plan was going to appear to be was the day of the annual meeting, the morning of the day of the annual meeting, in a back room behind closed doors with some coffee and donuts at the Northwest Kansas Technical College Union. This was also the day that we, after handing it out, 15 minutes later they had a little public session, and they went back behind the doors and approved it to be sent off to the chief engineer. So, as my public knowledge, that's what I was exposed to actually see the language and protest. The public meetings just were not very detailed, like everybody said. They were so vague. Nobody really even knew what questions to ask or how to approach it because we didn't understand it. Today, like Bert said, was the first day we've ever understood that 25% and how that plays into our water right. And for a lot of these water rights, that is a very important issue of the issue.
What was the date of the annual meeting, do you know?
Somebody else would know the actual date.
It was in February, but I couldn't tell you the date without looking at
You wonder the date that it was, if it was the date it was approved, it was June 8th.
Well,
No,
there was a version sent, they sent a version in February, and so it was approved to send. So that's probably the version.
So the one that we saw, I think was in February of 2017, the day of the annual meeting, was predate, or the top of the page said June 8th, or was the it's forward dated to when it was going to kind of be sent off.
Sure.
When you said behind closed doors, you mean like an executive session?
No,
Or just
the door was open to the public, but it wasn't easily accessible. I mean, as a person of the public, you kind of needed to know where you were heading. You didn't just stumble upon it. And then I just want to go on record, lastly, to say that I'm a third-generation farmer in Sherman County with 2 young boys that have already expressed a high interest in farming, and that there are many people like me that would oppose this current LEMA but have a long vested interest in this community and this water. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Very good.
One thing, I just want to make the record clear that we've had an interesting hearing and it's been helpful. But there are a lot of unanswered questions still, and we need more documents. And I believe that both Aaron and Adam are working real hard to get those documents to us. But in terms of, there are going to be more questions, and you've given us the opportunity to make additional submissions, and we understand that, appreciate it. But I don't think the record can be closed at this time. There are a lot of questions, and maybe not an opportunity to answer them. But I just want to be clear that there's still more to come, I think.
Mr. Dees?
Just a real quick response to that. I don't think the record is going to be closed until December 12th for submission of written testimony, if I understand that correctly.
That's correct.
Thanks.
Very good. Well, I appreciate everybody attending today. It's been a long day, and appreciate the group here that's participated in the hearing. So let me go ahead and move us toward conclusion. Again, as we just alluded to, You'll be free to provide written testimony. Whether you provide oral testimony here or not. Again, back on the back table there's a little card that sort of indicates how you can go about providing that testimony. Written comments must be submitted or postmarked by December 12th. Anyone may submit written testimony before that date, and your written comments will be made part of the record of this hearing. Information is available. Those instructions are back there. I referred to that. As we receive written testimony, it will be posted on our website. We'll also post a transcript of this hearing on our website as soon as it becomes available. The record will close on December 12, 2017. After it's closed, I'll review the record and make a decision on how to proceed pursuant to the GMD's request. Just as in statute, there are 2 separate hearings for a successful LEMA process. The statute requires 2 separate orders. First, pursuant to statute, I have 180 days to issue my order of decision. In this order of decision, 120 days. Yeah, I have 120 days to issue my order of decision. In that order, I have the following choices. I can accept the LEMA plan as proposed. I can reject the LEMA plan as insufficient to address the conditions. I can return the plan if it's determined to be deficient with reasons and options for the GMD to revise and resubmit the plan. Or fourthly, I can return the plan with specific suggestions or improvements which the GMD can accept or reject. If the order of decision accepts the plan, then I will subsequently issue an order of designation designating the areas of LEMA and ordering the specific corrective controls within the plan. Since the GMD has already proposed changes to the proposed plan, it is likely that the order of decision will return the plan to the GMD board for further consideration of proposed changes and any other matters that I determine necessary. I appreciate your appearance and your comments today. With that, we'll close the oral testimony in this manner. Thank you. Thank you.